something. And then how viable, realistic, achievable, feasible is the idea. And I suppose related to that is, what will it take? What are the practical steps that it will take for employers to come on board and to get this off the ground? So I believe there will be people who will be passing the mics around. So the floor is open for discussions, questions, comments, observation, reflections. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Hello. Hi. I'm Peter Adams. I'm currently working on a project called the Youth Leadership Initiative out in Lephalale. And we're working with the local people that are becoming demobilized from that project, from the full project. And just as a matter of interest, we've actually had quite a bit of experience, almost 5 years now, on that project with something absolutely similar to this. We've trained about 1,300 of some of those demobilized people in technical skills through the TVET College and private training providers in Lephalale. The uphill problem that we've been facing is the placement of those people into jobs afterwards. We actually initially we designed skills programs, short skills programs, based on qualifications in various trades. Like we started out in the building industry, building and civils industry, because there was a big project to build 500 houses or 5,000 houses, and that project never came off. Then we moved towards the SIP, equipping those people with technical skills, engineering-related skills, and none of the SIP projects came off, not yet, at least. So, and the contractors that are on that project are pressed for time. They don't have time to take people in and give them further job experience. So we've had serious problems in placing those people. So my observation and my opinion of this is, yes, that might probably work in large urban areas, but in smaller rural towns where the economy is very small, you're probably going to struggle to place those people and get employers to absorb these youngsters. I mean, right now I can give you 1,300 people that have been trained through the TVET College and private training providers with certificates, unit standard-based training, skills programs in all of these skills. And you can place them if you can, or alternatively, if you can assist us to find employers in that part of the world to place them, we're happy to work with you. But I'd also like to have a further discussion with you guys beyond this point.
Thank you very much. Peter, I think, so just confirm the numbers again.
Roughly 1,300.
1,300. And I think that's a good important question, particularly if you layer it with the localization issues, license to operate, where you're restricted to only place in certain areas. You can't go to, as wide as you would want to. There's a question at the back. So we'll take how many? 3, 4 questions?
Hi. My name is Nora. I'm from the Energy and Water SETA. Obviously, this is a large part of what we do, and I have a number of questions closely linked to what Peter was saying, but slightly different angle. In that, large part of the new National Skills Development Plan, as it was presented, and also some of the projects coming out of here, which the SETAs are driving, is very similar to exactly this. You have public TVETs, and then you create a closed geographic network around them with workplaces. We even offer money to employers, and we engage. Employers, the ones that come to the party, they often are so overloaded with learners that actually, you know, for example, one of the things we have to take into account, which I don't know how you're going to do that, but I mean, I'm sure you have some kind of vetting process for these workplaces, even if it's not strictly workplace accreditation, is that, you know, while there is a ratio of 1 to 5 or whatever that we have defined, they actually sometimes have 1 to 20 because, you know, they get funding from this CETA and this CETA and that CETA, and there is no actual communication. So often, you know, you have one mentor that is completely overloaded, and then what happens is you have 15 people sitting around instead of them actually getting practical training, although in theory their logbook is all filled in. So, you know, my fear is that now there's a whole bunch of competition for the same workplaces with the same employers. Because I know, you know, with the Centers of Specialization project, which the CETAs are driving, which you might be familiar with, that's exactly the model we're going for. And, you know, the same employers were approached over and over and over. The municipalities are up to here. They say they can't even understand. They can't possibly take any more people because it's the same workplaces. Especially when you then go to public colleges and, you know, there is only so many employers around these public TVET colleges, particularly because everyone is going to the technical vocations or, you know, whatever technical fields. So essentially my question is a little bit how are you dealing with competition, I guess, you know, for these workplaces, which I see as serious issues among the CETAs and now also with projects like this, which are popping up all over. My other question is how you see this playing out in the long run, considering that the occupational qualifications are coming in. And, you know, they are exactly your integrated model, so also workplaces. Again, there will be a huge strain on employers, particularly the large employers that can actually deliver on these various skills that are needed. And my other and last question, although I have others, is you know, if you look at the matric numbers, right, what the Department of Basic Education does is, you know, that while you have, you know, matriculation rates of, what is it now, 63% or whatever, but actually what happens is that most people that come out of grade 9 don't even make it to matric, right? So the pressure is huge for these matric numbers, but actually very few people that, you know, that should actually go through the system even make it that far. So if you pre-select at TVET colleges, right? Don't you just have the same system where sure now you have higher throughput rates, but actually all you do is you're pre-screening, and the problem of people not having any education now doesn't go away at all. So that's I have others.
I see a couple of notes.
I think I need to move away from the camera.
Yes.
Yeah. We have there was a question here, and then we'll take the other ones. Or maybe you come first. There was a question here. Wasn't there a question here? Oh, okay. So there and here.
I'm staying in the same region as Peter. I'm Liesel Fair. I'm from Ivanhoe Mines. We have a project. We're building a platinum mine in Limpopo, in the town of Mokopane. So we're in the same region as Peter. And I want to make this comment that often people think, yes, the mines are here, jobs, jobs, jobs. But I want to sketch you the picture of what we will be facing when this mine becomes operational. It's a mine situated closely in 20 communities with 150,000 people, youth and unemployment rate that's not unfamiliar, 54%, and at the peak of production we will only be able to employ 2,500 people. The expectations are huge, even now while we haven't even mined an ounce of platinum. So what have we learned on this journey? Our first social and labour plan is in the last year of implementation, and it has a strong enterprise and supply development focus. Lots of core and non-core training. We have the same issue. We did the non-core training, but where do the people go? So one point that I just want to make, something that we've learned, is that the same skills that make a young person employable is often the same skills that make him viable to become a small entrepreneur. So I'm a very strong proponent of equipping young people not only with a pathway into a job, but a parallel pathway into becoming part of at least the informal economy if they can't be scaled up to be a formal supplier first. So that's the first designer at our company yet, but something that we're looking at with a consultant and also with the CSIR is to help to ease the burden that she talked about on the employer who's taken in interns, who's taken in lots of young people. And it's only a small part of my job description to keep that young person busy, to help with that administration. Is really innovative and fantastic digital ways to do this that's coming into the market. I'm quite excited about that because I think it will ease the people burden on managers or such as myself. So obviously there's still a lot to be said, but those are the two contributions that I would have liked to make. And as you both said, this isn't something that one industry or one type of intervention will target and solve. But working together, multi-pronged approach, we could definitely make a difference, I hope.
Thank you very much. The last question on this round.
My name is Jeff. I'm from Plumbing Johannesburg. We are a plumbing company. We operate within the insurance space as well. So when you say demand, let's drive demand, I don't think that's the issue. In the plumbing industry, you must understand, we operate on an emergency basis. So if there's a problem, it gets solved. And that happens, it gets done. The problem is quality. So we face a quality problem. So this specific program that you're driving is really good to solve a quality problem. That's great. Placement is going to be an issue afterwards. When I take a young candidate in and I train him up to provide a quality service, that person's not necessarily going to stay with us because we already have employees that are doing the quality work. The problem here is growing. No one's growing. Companies aren't growing. The only way you can place people is through growth. And that is the issue because we have hundreds of people applying for jobs at any given time. And a lot of them are pretty skilled. The problem is how do you pick and choose? And where Harambee, when you guys come in, which is nice, is that you pre-screen soft skills are important. So that's our thing. But I think placement is going to be a massive issue afterwards. Even for us, yeah. So that's why I think to couple this with an entrepreneurship type of initiative, when that guy leaves, I can trust that he can still survive and pay his way.
Thank you, Jeff. And I know why you are sitting next to Debbie. She's been whispering in your ear about entrepreneurship. Okay, so we have the 4 questions, but I really would like to encourage discussion so that the questions don't just come to the project, to NDI Harambee.
Labor absorption mechanism is a point that IRM is trying to solve. So there's a big push in terms of IRM to build that informal employment opportunity that exists, and how do you formalize some aspect of that informality to be able to sustain it, and for employers to be able to utilize the obligations on ESD and skills development and so on. So I think I've taken my fair share, so I'll sort of stop there.
Anton?
Yeah, so just to talk to some of the challenges in the skills system, because I think the range of issues that you alluded to are very much the problems that we face in terms of the inefficiencies of the system and the restrictions of the system to create meaningful pathways. There isn't a proper coordination between the supply and the demand. So the role of building the relationships with employers on a meaningful basis and managing those pathways doesn't happen in many places. So it's a case of these workplaces get dumped with these candidates and they don't know what to do with them or whatever it is, or they're doing it for the wrong reasons, or they're doing it for expediency, whatever it is. We need to be able to make more meaning of what that work placement actually means. But I also think the shift to the occupational qualifications and the centres of specialisation is actually taking us backwards. It's not taking us forward. Because the reality is that's not what industry requires, and it's not how industry works. Yes, we need artisans. I'm not disputing the fact that we're not trying to close the door. As you said, one of our pathways is very much to artisan status, and we see the trades are still critical for the economy, but it's not going to solve the problem. So building centres of specialisation is great for the trades, but it's always only going to benefit a small number of young people. The occupational qualifications similarly. There are only going to be limited pathways into occupational qualifications, and those qualifications prepare you for very narrow sorts of roles. They're not really building you for the workplace. They're very supply driven. And even if they happen to be delivered differently, which is in very small cases, if you can get the workplace requirements, the workplace learning requirements right, which is only going to be, as you said, in the large industries, the chances that those young people are going to be employable in an SME environment or even into enterprise development is going to be very limited. So my sense, and I've worked in the sector for 20 years now, is that focusing on qualifications, focusing on specialization, focusing on trades takes us backwards. It doesn't open up. It actually narrows the funnel. We do need to make sense of the workplace learning requirements, and that's one of the key things that we're doing here. What are we training them for in the workplace? And it's not against the qualification, because as soon as it's against the qualification, then it's just compliance, and then it's like, trying to, tick boxes. What we're doing is like, what are we preparing them for, the roles that we're preparing them for? And we've worked with many large employers, right? And yes, there is a qualification element because they have to meet certain requirements. But the reality is they say the qualification is just there. But what we're actually preparing them for is this. And qualifications take a long time to develop and change and whatever it is. And by the time you develop them and change, industry's moved. So I think we have to break out of that mold, and I can say that unapologetically because I don't work for government, and I don't try and drive a particular policy agenda. For me, it's about how do we get these kids into jobs. That's really what it comes down to, fundamentally. And we're going to find the most efficient and effective way of doing that by managing that interface between the supply and the demand. So yes, the colleges and the new skills development strategy, the NSDP, whatever it is, yes, talks to these things in principle, but in reality it doesn't happen, as you've already indicated. It doesn't happen because it's not managed. It's not coordinated effectively. So we say, take these candidates for workplace learning, but to what end? To meet this and to meet that, but it actually, at the end of the day, doesn't convert into a job. And if it doesn't convert into a job or a micro-enterprise opportunity or whatever it is that we try to build, then we haven't achieved anything. All we've done is trained, and we haven't actually addressed the structural problems in the labour market, which are of our own making. All we're doing is actually perpetuating them. So I'm quite hardline and passionate about that because I've been working in the system and I've seen all the ills of what we try to do in terms of trying to manufacture pathways by using qualification routes. It doesn't help our cause. It's important for certain pathways, but it's not the final solution. And I think the illustration of what we try to, what the challenges that we face in various communities, particularly outside of your major urban areas, speaks to the fact that we have to be quite agile and flexible about what we're preparing these candidates for. So we're not only preparing them for jobs, we recognize that, which is why we see at least 30%, at least, if not might be more, of those pathways will convert into SMEs, micro-enterprises, whatever. And we're working actively with our government partners in Gauteng, in the Western Cape, to find ways to do that, open up those opportunities. The Joburg City Inner Partnership is one of those key ways. We work with Sasol and others to make sure that we are actively preparing candidates for those sort of opportunities, and not just for jobs, because we know that the jobs might not always be there, right, in those kind of cases. So we can talk a lot more. So what I need to say is that we haven't got down to all the detail. I've spoken a lot, and I don't want to speak anymore. I was nice because I'm going to be told to shut up in a minute. But the point about it is there's a lot more, and we've thought about all of these things. So we're not, we can't address it all in a presentation because we'll bore you stuff. But we've thought about it, and we've engaged multiple stakeholders around all of these things. And yes, we recognize that we need to work with everyone. We need to work with the SETAs and make it work for the SETAs. We need to work with DHET and make it work for the colleges. We need to work this ecosystem better because it's very inefficient and it's not benefiting all the young people out there. The system needs a reorganization. And this is what we're trying to do, but we're not doing it by coming from here and saying, oh no, we need to change policy first and then it must filter down. We're saying, let's do it from here, let's build the base, let's demonstrate how it can work, and then we can start filtering that into policy, into change in terms of funding and all those things, but you can only do it through demonstration. And we're running. We've got 100 candidates running. They're going to go into these opportunities. They're going to get employed. And that's how we'll demonstrate it. And the employers will tell us, ultimately, as they tell you, are you happy with this candidate? Are you going to keep this candidate? Are you going to retain this candidate? Are you going to work with this candidate? That's going to be the proof of the whole thing.
Yeah. Thank you. We're going to take another round of questions, but I think it's suffice it to say that, I mean, Peter, your question about your experience with Midupi, right? And I speak under correction. I mean, I was involved in some of the early processes which kind of informed your project. But I think it's a clear illustration of what happens when you haven't thought about things up front. So all of a sudden the construction comes to an end and someone wakes up in the morning and says, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with these guys? So overnight you put together a program which is not well thought out. But to say that doesn't take away, I think, the complexity of actually working in rural environments where there aren't many employers to start off with. So these are real issues that we will have to process and say, how then do we actually train? I mean, to Anthony's point about how do we actually address the problem rather than pigeonholing ourselves into qualifications that, take a long time to design and to actually implement. And when we've invested all that time, no employer is sitting waiting for the qualifications to come through. Before I take the next round of questions, are there responses from the floor? Because as I said, we really want to encourage discussion so that the questions aren't just directed at Harambee and Mbia. If you have any exciting views, I mean, I've already, Lizzle, you mentioned something about, so we're going to talk to you about this innovation that you spoke about, the logbook, because we are talking about, digitization of logbooks. Digitalization or digitization, something like that. But we're looking for innovation out there to say, how can we do this? And yeah. So there's a question here, and then there's a question at the back, and then there's a question there.
Hi, yes, I've got a response as well. My name is Johan Victorious. I work for Aerospace Aviation. We manufacture aircraft parts for Boeing and Airbus. And we have our own training school in terms of our operators and our artisans. So for me, this is a great initiative because it's become a mechanism to feed our environment. However, we have got a major challenge, and I would like to, and that's part of the second thing, the question I want to ask is how you will bridge the gaps in terms of basic literacy. I mean, there's no shortfall of candidates, and they do have the skills with the hands, but we find that to teach the guys to basic read and write is still a challenge, and that's obviously what you get from people coming out of the educational system. So that's my question. In terms of the response, I think the initiative is great, and I think coming back to the competition type thing, and if we learn anything, there's a major issue within South Africa in terms of employment and the skilling of our youth. However, if everyone's going to go in his own direction, we're obviously going to have a diluted effort in terms of how we're going to achieve or overcome this problem. Now, we have to focus, so we have to converge in terms of strategies and partnerships, and that's where the ecosystem comes in. So we sort of have to start taking the different approach coming from a fourth industrial revolution and digital disruption type environment. This is where you look at what is the competitive edge or the value that you bring and how can we leverage that to our benefit. And I think that would be my advice to all other businesses having similar initiatives, is to partner up and see how you can build on each other's strengths and how you can take that and leverage that to get a better impact. So converge and focus on a single strategy to move forward. So that would be my insights around creating the ecosystem itself.
Thank you very much. Spot on. Yes.
Thank you, Ricardo. My name is Nasreen Mani. I'm from Business Leadership South Africa. Author of the movement Endoni. I think what I do want to say on the last point is there are 6 million plus unemployed youth in this country. So by all means, bring on the competition. because one initiative is not going to solve it. We need as many innovative initiatives as this. So it is not about competition with the CETAs and other structures. It is very much about, we have a major problem with probably one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the world, and we have to do whatever we can. Secondly, on the issue of the National Skills Development Plan, business, so Makana, myself, other people in the room, we've been intimately involved for the last 4 years around providing input to the Department of Higher Education and Training on a decent national skills development strategy. The fact that it's taken us 4 years and we haven't finalized it is an indictment on all of us. And the systemic issues that Anthony spoke about is what we have to speak to. And as you correctly pointed out, we can only do that through demonstration. Because we've sat for 4 years talking about a policy strategy. We are maybe, I don't know, kind of 80% there. But one of our big issues was we cannot only focus on qualifications. And Anthony spoke about that as well. We have to have a flexible system that speaks to full qualifications, part qualifications, and non-accredited qualifications, which certain sectors that you've identified in this project will need. There are no fiber qualifications. Does it mean we must stop training people? By all means not. We have to train them up, we have to skill them with transferable skills that can take them into many industries. And we must stop being hung up on qualifications. It's a major business area that we have said. We're not discounting the need for qualifications, but we're saying let's put the skills there to use far more practically so that we can fund all kinds of training. And we talk about the future of work as a term that's somewhere far in the distant future. Future of work is now. South Africa's behind the curve. I was in a workshop a few months ago where we were talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and I had someone say, are we ready for it? We'll actually be in it. And we should be planning for the 5th and 6th. And we can't wait 18 months for the QCTO to develop curriculum. So we have to be agile, we have to be innovative. And I think we've got to stop hiding behind bureaucracy. But that's my parting shot. Thank you.
Whoa.
Hi, I'm Denise from Toko's Son, and we were just talking about bureaucracy, so this would be a great way to continue on that path. I just want to put it out there in my experience, various new legislations which have come in the last few years, and often conflicting legislation is making it really difficult for businesses to support these kinds of initiatives the way that they would like to. A lot of businesses are really for it. However, legislation really curtails what we could be doing, and various conflicts in legislation also makes it quite difficult for business. So there need to be more synergies from that perspective when it comes to legislation. One example is the status of somebody who's doing on-the-job or on learning in the business. Some legislations say they are employees, others say they're not, and with the status of employee come lots of things that businesses have to do. So that does have an effect, and I'm not sure that we need to be looking at that as well. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. Is there the fourth question, Debbie?
It's less a question and more just an invitation to consider this. I think that we've spoken a lot about the supply, but in terms of the employers, the preparation of employers for this kind of eager, curious, and highly motivated learner to get the workplace is something I would love to explore with the expertise and wisdom in this room, because small businesses, you're like a family, and so in many instances that mix and that ability for a small business to absorb somebody like this with such initiative who wants to be in the workplace and to be able to mentor them. We speak so lightly about mentorship, but genuinely provide the expertise and learning and guidance. It's not just so easy. Small businesses to arrange small teams and so forth, and how do we prepare them for that? So I just want to throw that out as an invitation.
I suppose if I could also extend the question a bit, what is the appetite from employers in this room to incorporate entrepreneurship into their systems or the way they operate. Because yet again, it might be that we're talking about a concept that sits here, it makes sense on paper, but actually translating it into practice is a completely different exercise. So, in your technical aspects, area, is there scope, is there appetite for, supplier, what do you call it? Enterprise development, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's part of our drive as well, because we realize that in order to grow our own business, we need to create the sandpit where everyone can play. To create that leapfrog type environment where we have this exponential growth within our environment. There is so much opportunity within Africa as a continent, because we can also expand it into that. We have got the skills, we have got the aptitude, we have got the abilities within Africa. We're a very innovative nation to start with. But I think at the end of the day is we've got such little resources to apply to that culture due to the fact that our people doesn't get skilled and people don't get pulled into the system where those are unmined resources. And if we can get those resources to be valuable to our businesses, we can really grow the overall economy within South Africa. And it's about, one of my personal convictions in life is to learn something new every day and teach someone else something new every day. So that way you're in the sliding scale the whole time and you're continuously learning and teaching.
Okay, thank you. So this last round of questions were more observations, comments, tips, sometimes even showing a little bit of frustration. Sylvester, Anthony, Mandy, Cecil, anything from you?